Hello and welcome. My name is Amber, and today I am going to tell you how well I did in the Goodreads Fall Challenge. The Goodreads challenges were added to Goodreads sometime last year, and typically they run for a season. They give you a list of achievements, and there are two types of achievements. The first one is to read a certain number of books, and the second one is to read books from particular lists that they have created that are themed in some way. The last time that I did a video on one of the challenges, I did a wrap-up and TBR in one. But I think today I'm going to just do a wrap-up instead and talk a bit more about the books than I did previously. And then once all the prompts have been revealed for the next challenge, then I will do a video for the TBR for that one. I think that will be in March sometime. So today I'm going to go through the different achievements for the fall challenge, tell you what I read from and tell you a little bit about the book. So the first three achievements were really easy. They were Page Turner, read 2 books, Speed Reader, read 3 books, and Book Boss, read 5 books. For these achievements, I read A Time of Dread by Gwynne, The Pumpkin Spice Café by Laurie Gilmore, The Private School Murders by James Patterson and Maxine Paetro, Dreadfully Ever After by Hockensmith, and Human Rites by Juno, Dawson. So A Time of Dread is the first in the Of Blood and Bone series, which is a follow-up series to The Faithful and the Fallen. We follow multiple perspectives. The first is Riv, who is training to be part of a peacekeeping force under an authoritarian regime. Then we have Sig, who is investigating the cultish followers of an old enemy. And Drem, a trapper who starts finding mutilated bodies in the forest. I enjoyed this book and was pleasantly surprised to find an element of horror towards the end of it. I hadn't expected it. It was an intriguing start to the series where we didn't really know what was going on at the beginning, but slowly started to build a bigger picture so that we knew what our characters were up against. I didn't quite bond with the characters as much as I did in The Faithful and the Fallen, but I believe that was because in The Faithful and the Fallen we have a book which is pretty much dedicated to getting to know the characters, and where there's just rumblings that something is going on, whereas in this one we pretty much go straight into the plot. But I did still like the characters, and I think my favourite character was actually in this series rather than the previous series. Then there was The Pumpkin Spice Café by Laurie Gilmore. I didn't like this book. I thought it was really boring. It started off well, but then teetered out, and I think this was because the stakes were too low. It is a cosy romance, so with the cosy genre the stakes do tend to be low, but they were too low, and any conflict in it just didn't seem big enough to keep me interested. It is about Jeannie, who is gifted the cafe by her aunt, and when she moves to the small town in order to run it, she meets Logan, a grumpy farmer who is well liked in the town. Neither of them want a relationship, but it's very clear that there's something between them. And I guess there's a little bit of will they won't they in there, but I tend to find will they won't they in romance doesn't really resonate with me, because they will. Sometimes it can be done well, in which it just keeps building and building tension, but it didn't in this. I just wasn't interested. Then The Private School Murders. This is the second in the Confession series, which features Tandy Angel, who in the first book is investigating the murder of her parents while she is one of the prime suspects. In this book she's trying to solve further murders, including the murders of some private school girls. But while she is investigating these murders, both in this book and the previous book, she's also learning more about her family and the secrets that they've kept, and is also trying to deal with the repercussions of some of these secrets. I enjoyed this book, but it didn't really blow me away. It's fast-paced, and I find myself intrigued as to what is going to happen in it. But I don't really connect to the characters, and I think some of the storylines are a bit silly. Now, I rated the first book quite highly, and I rated this one 3 stars, but I believe that's more because of me than the books. It's been quite a while since I read the first book, and I think I have grown and matured as a person, and also grown and matured as a reader as well. So I don't really connect to the book or the characters as much as I used to. I do plan on reading the rest of the series, but I don't know when that will happen. Then Dreadfully Ever After by Hockensmith. This is the sequel to Pride, Prejudice and Zombies, which is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but with zombies, which is probably quite evident by the title. I guess sort of spoilers for Pride and Prejudice ahead. I think most people know that story by now. So at the end of Pride and Prejudice, Darcy and Elizabeth marry. So this is set shortly after that, where Elizabeth has had to give up zombie hunting because married women simply do not do that. It is unbecoming. However, she misses it, and when a horde of zombies is seen on her land, she is quick to massacre them alongside her husband. Unfortunately, in this encounter, Darcy is bitten, and while he starts to slowly turn into a zombie, she heads to London in search of a cure. And I especially liked Kitty's point of view, who is Elizabeth's younger sister, as I preferred her as a character and also preferred her storyline as well. Overall, the series has been an entertaining one, and I actually enjoyed it more than Pride and Prejudice, which I find rather dull, and I guess what I was missing from that story was zombies. Who would have thought? Then the last book for these achievements was Human Rites by Juno Dawson. This is the last in Her Majesty's Royal Coven series, which is a trilogy about a group of witches who grew up together but have now gone their separate paths. However, they end up coming back together when the sullied child is found, who is a child who is prophesied to destroy Her Majesty's Royal Coven. Now, as this is the last in the trilogy, there's not that much I can say, but it won't be spoilers for the rest of the books. Of course, our characters are now facing the biggest battle of the series. They are facing the consequences of their own actions, and are trying to ensure the survival of their loved ones and the larger world. I felt that this book wrapped up the series well. There were a few plot points that I didn't really like, but I think overall I really enjoyed it. I did like the first and second a bit more than this, but I still really liked it and gave it 4 stars. So those were the books that I read for the achievements that just required you to read X amount of books. Now for the other achievements, which were a bit more specific. So again with these, there were achievements that asked you to read from a specific list of books that they provided. The first one was community picks, which was read One Dark Academia. So for this, I read A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This is the first in the Scholarman series, and it falls into Dark Academia as it is set in a school which is full of monsters. Many students don't make it to graduation, and if they do, in order to graduate, they must fight their way through the school and through the biggest and baddest of the monsters that are there. I was really disappointed with this book. I had high hopes, and I found at the beginning I was really bored. It took about 90 pages before the plot started to emerge, and in those 90 pages there was a lot of exposition, and it did a lot of telling and not showing. We were in the head of Elle, who is pretty much just telling us about her world in a way that made it seem like she was directly talking to us, and I felt that this was really inorganic. Now, once the plot did start, it started to get a whole lot more interesting, and I was quite invested at the end, and that led me to give it a 3-star rather than a 2-star. It did also make me a little interested in the next 2 books, but I'm not in a rush to get to them. The next achievement was Hispanic Heritage, which was read a book for Hispanic Heritage Month, and I read The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno Garcia, who is a Mexican author. The Bewitching follows 3 different characters across 3 timelines. The first is Minerva, who is a graduate student investigating the life of Beatrice Tremblay. The second is Beatrice herself, who is an author whose friend's disappearance inspired her greatest work. And then we follow Alba, who is Minerva's grandmother, and we follow her during her younger years. Through all 3 of these storylines, we meet the threat of witchcraft, which puts the lives of our 3 characters in danger. I had really been looking forward to this book as I enjoyed Silver Nitrate by the same author. But for me, this one just didn't work for me. It was very slow moving, and it was too slow moving for me that I became bored. I preferred Minerva's point of view. I found with the other 2 characters I just wanted it to hurry up and get back to Minerva because I wasn't interested in their story. And just like with A Deadly Education, it was only the ending that stopped the book from being 2 stars and put it at 3 stars instead. Then Spine Tingler, read one horror book. I read The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. This is a horror about Kara, who finds a hole in the wall of her uncle's curiosity museum. Seeing a corridor behind it, she goes through it, and finds that it's a portal to another world. She soon finds herself lost in this world, with the feeling that she's being watched and that there is something unimaginable out there to get her. I enjoyed this one throughout. It was very atmospheric, and I was constantly wondering what was going to happen next. There was, however, something about the book that annoyed me, and that was a lack of subtlety around something at the beginning that was going to turn out to be very important. I don't know if it was done that way in order to raise tension, but the only tension it caused in me was annoyance. But overall it was great, and I hope to read more from the author. The next achievement was Heartwarmers. Read a cosy read, and for this I read A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandanna. This is about Sarah, who was once one of the strongest, most powerful witches in Britain. However, when she resurrects her great aunt from the newly dead, she loses almost all her power. She's then exiled from her guild and focuses on running the inn where her and her great aunt live. And then she learns about a spell book that could restore her magic, and she teams up with Luke, a historian, in order to try and get their hands on it. It was definitely a cosy read, but unlike Pumpkin Spice Café, the stakes were a little bit higher, and I was a lot more interested in the book. I also think I liked the characters more, finding them a whole lot more interesting as well. Then Fiction Faves. Read a favourite fiction book. For this I read My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. It might be a reader's favourite book, but it was not mine. I didn't enjoy it. It is about Vanessa, who when she was 15 was having a sexual relationship with her teacher. The story is told in two timelines. The first is when she's been groomed into this relationship and the relationship itself, and the second timeline is when she is in her 30s and the teacher is accused of sexual abuse by another student. This was a very difficult read and I didn't enjoy it. It was, however, well written. It did a good job of getting into the head of Vanessa. We are seeing what happened to her through her own eyes, and we're seeing that how she viewed what happened is different in places than what actually happened. And we can see that the reason she views this differently is basically just a way of her protecting herself from what actually happened. I felt that it was really well done, and the book was written well, but it just made me really sad, and I didn't enjoy it. I would have actually DNF'd it if it wasn't for reading it for this challenge. Then for a similar achievement, we had Memorable Memoirs, which was to read one reader favourite memoir. I read Sociopath by Patric Gagne. This is a memoir of Patric Gagne, who is a sociopath. Again, something you might have been able to pick up from the title. It details her life from childhood to young adulthood, while she tries to deal with living with a personality disorder that is demonised and under-researched. It was an interesting read, especially as I didn't know that much about sociopaths, and I knew even less about the lived experience of sociopaths, which I think the lived experience of a condition is very important in understanding people with that condition and what they need and what can help them. I felt I learnt a lot from it, but I did find my interest wavering towards the end. I think this is common when I'm reading memoirs. I quite often lose interest a bit towards the end. I guess this is probably because I'm used to reading fiction, where towards the end everything starts ramping up, but because this is real life, that doesn't really happen. So perhaps if I read more memoirs, I wouldn't start getting as bored because I'd be more used to the patterns they follow, which is that they probably don't follow a pattern because people's lives don't. Then for Native Voices, needed to read a book for Native American Heritage Month. For this I read Terror of the Gates by Scarlett St. Clair. So I had read books from this author previously, but I didn't know that she was Native American. But looking at her bio, she is a citizen of the Muskogee Nation. This is the first in the Blood of Lilith series, and it's about Lilith, who is estranged from her powerful family and finds refuge in Nineveh, which is a district of the city devoted to sin. There she makes a living through using her magic ability to steal things. One day she steals a blade, and when she tries to sell it on, her usual buyer dies while holding it. I really enjoyed this book. It was exactly what I needed at that moment, in that if I had been a mood reader, it fit perfectly with my mood. I don't usually mood read, but on this occasion I did, and I'm glad that I did. So I liked the setting, I liked the characters, and I liked the romance. I also liked the exploration of trauma and problems within religion, though when I say problems within religion, I more mean problems you find wherever there are power differences. It just so happens in this book that it is within religion. We also see it in religious organisations in the real world as well, unfortunately. I gave this book a high 4 stars, and I look forward to reading the next, which I believe is out at the end of this year. Then we had the achievement bite-sized books, which was read a short book, and I read The Hounding by Xenobe Purvis. This was my last 5-star of the year, so I enjoyed it. It's 240 pages, but I read it by audiobook on double speed, so it was just over 3 hours to get through it. It actually caused me to seek out more household tasks to do while I was listening to it, as towards the end I started to get really invested and wanted to know what was going to happen. This book is about 5 sisters who are growing up in a small village when the villagers start to believe that they are turning into dogs. But the book is not told from the sisters' point of view, but it's told from different villagers. So we're basically watching the story unfold from the outside. This is a narrative style that I feel only works in a few cases, and this is one of the cases where it did work. It was a really effective way of showing how people can react and view outsiders and otherness, as well as showing how easy rumours can spread and build, which I think happens as easily today as it did in the 18th century, which is when this book is set. The final achievement was Choice Awards. Read one of the 2025 Goodreads Choice Awards winners or nominees, and as you could double up on prompts, I actually read The Hounding for this prompt as well, and this was a nominee for Reader's Favourite Historical Fiction. So that is everything that I read for the Goodreads Fall Challenge. Did anyone else participate in it? If so, what did you read? Let me know in the comments. And as always, like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will catch you in the next one.